Hello and welcome everyone to Intuition Fridays here with Penny Kelly and ASHALA. It's been a while. So we are coming to you live, obviously, on Fridays. It looks like we're going to be doing the next 2 or 3, I think, and then taking another break for the month of July. It's so lovely to be back here with you, Penny. Welcome.
Oh, it's good to be back. I was at one point I thought, oh, I need a break. But then after a while I thought, wow, I really hate to leave people hanging, because I do get letters from people, emails saying, what about this? Or you mentioned that, or are you going to be back on, or whatever. So yeah, so it's good to be here. And I hope everybody out there is holding their own, we'll say. Okay.
Definitely. So before we get started, as always, I'm going to bring your attention over here to our beautiful channel, YouTube, all kinds of incredible shows, just more and more great things. I really saw some great comments with your last Wacky Woo show, Penny, and looking forward to watching that when I get a chance here.
And are you going to have a chance?
I don't know.
Are you going to find the time? Oh, wow.
And then over here on the Beyond Mystic Rumble channel, you can, of course, follow us. And we are over 80K now. Woohoo!
Yeah.
And if you would like to book a consultation with me, you can find me here on the Beyond Mystic Consultations page. And utilize the coupon code below to get a 10% discount on your session. I'm taking bookings the week after next, so would love to meet up with you over there and support you in whatever way feels good at this time. And of course, where have I got Penny Kelly here? There it is. You can find Penny at pennykelly.com, Creating Consciousness Community, classes, store, all kinds of incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Ebooks, online classes, registration for courses, and so on. So without further ado, Penny, let's jump into today's show. You have some interesting topics on the table for us. Would you like to just give us a little sneak peek, and then maybe we can start by looking at the cards and exploring one of these topics based on what our collective guidance is pulling in for us?
Okay. So I have 4 topics. One is, the first one is the ability to ask relevant questions and not twist the answers due to bias. We often go after intuitive information, and then we're like, la, 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 la. We don't want the information because we're afraid of the truth or the bias, etc. So that's one topic. And what is bias, actually? And then my second topic is, it's about what's called maybe logic. And it's a kind of logic that is emerging in the tech field, but it's really relevant to consciousness. Okay. My third topic is being in a period of time in which it's really, my third topic is the rapture. But then the fourth one is we're in a period of time in which it's really hard to tell what's real. Why? What is that about? What do you do with that?
Yes.
And then I have some other pointers that I want to share with each one of those topics. But those are what I hope we'll get to cover. So
I believe we will. I kind of want to pull out of those topics, if it's okay with you, Penny.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really called to look at how we are discerning what's real. If we're able to start with that, because I've been seeing that theme across all our platforms. And yeah, I think that there's a lot to unpack there. And I do see how all your topics are connected, but let's start looking at if it's okay with you, I'd like to pull some
Yeah.
cards
Right.
on this ability to perceive reality.
Yeah.
And, it does feel like, to me, just off the top of my head, it feels like things have become so complex in terms of how much information is coming at us from all these different
Yeah.
sources.
Yeah.
And I always say, I'm really grateful in these confusing times for the amount of background research I've done over the years to create a worldview where I know I can recognize patterns. I might not be able to analyze everything and figure out everything, obviously,
Right.
but I can see the patterns. And
Yeah.
that helps me with
Oh,
discerning truth from fiction.
yeah. Amen. Yeah, go ahead with that.
Yeah.
That ability or inability to determine or to say or even decide, and hang on to that. Why are we having that difficulty? So, yeah. So go
Yeah.
ahead. What are the cards? What are your cards?
Let's see what the cards are saying. Tuning in with all of us present and what can be helpful for us. I do express often that being a Gemini, and actually I've got some layers of Gemini. I have my Mercury in Gemini as well. I have a very acute awareness of this experience of having so much information, and not always, even though I have done a lot of research and I have a lot of data on things, my interpretations are not always accurate. So I think this ties in with discerning what is real and what isn't. And that it is about getting into a state. For me, it's about sometimes if I'm upset, I will make these interpretations and they will seem completely realistic and absolutely correct. And then a couple of days later, when I've calmed down, I'm like, oh, that wasn't the whole picture.
Yeah. Right.
So let's just see what comes through here. I'm going to put the cards up a little bigger so we can have a look. So just 3 cards in a row about how do we interpret what
Wow.
is real and what isn't real. Isn't this interesting? This is almost what I just said.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 3 things I get is, first of all, here's the information coming towards us. 6 of Wands, information, clarifying communication of some kind. The swords are the mind, the ideas, the way they're communicated. And we are almost being shown as taking a pause before we interpret, because this person is going, well, wait just a minute. And also what I'm getting with this is it's not just about pausing and not trusting outside of yourself, but it's about pausing and maybe not trusting your immediate inside response to things. That you're just saying, okay, my first gut reaction or my first thought process is this, but I'm going to take a pause and wait for more information coming in from all my other senses. And then the last piece I'm getting with this is that then we check back in and test our theories. So we say, okay, I had the original thought, the information came at me. I had my first interpretation, which is sometimes has truth in it, right? That's our gut instinct in some occasions. But I gave myself some time to let everything kind of percolate. And then what I came to, I went back and checked it against is what I'm being shown here, right? Because he's there going like, okay, I've got my idea going towards the future. That's the sword, but he's looking back and going, let me just check that back with the source. let's just reinterpret that.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
kind of what I'm seeing.
Okay. If I look at those cards, if I had pulled those, I would, that Six of Swords, that first one, to me, that's the card of moving to a new home, moving to a new place. And because it's been too rough. If you look at the water, you can see it's really rough on one side of the water, and the other side is really smooth. And the people, there's a woman and a child sitting in the boat, and they are really moving almost against their will, like with a great deal of sadness. And so that's the card of moving to a new reality because the old one is too rough, and really being sad about what is having to be let go of. And then that second card, that's like, okay, that to me, cups are about the heart and the emotions. And that says, so far we haven't accepted anything we're being offered, nothing. And so there's been 3 offerings already, and now something else is being offered, and there we are. Show me something else. That kind of attitude. And yet at the same time, it's you need to look at what's being offered and go beyond what I'll call the shallow view of things, and look at the deeper side and see if you can see where that offering is actually going to take you. And then the last one, the sword, the Page of Swords. Pages are always on foot, means they're not moving. This particular page stands like he's got one foot ready to take a step, maybe, and he's not, it's like, I'm holding all this information. What do I do? Where do I take it? So maybe and up in the sky, there's a flock of birds that are flying in formation. That's a migratory kind of thing that also reinforces that a lot of people may not see what is the paradigm, the reality migrating to. And so it's not real to them. So maybe they're hanging on to the past. And, if our question is, why aren't people able to determine what's real, what's in the way, et cetera, they don't see anything that they expect to see, and they're not sure where we're going, and so they haven't taken any steps. So yeah,
that's interesting. And we do have right now, it's all in a way hypothetical, yes, because we have a lot of the swords and the cups. There's nothing grounded.
real.
There's no pentacles. There's nothing
That's
real.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still all sort of in a way hypothesis. I like what you said, Penny, about, we haven't decided even, are we accepting any of this on some level? And we're not going to know that we are accepting it and fully integrating it until we actually do take that step.
Right.
Which is interesting because we're still in Gemini season. And when I talk to people about working with Geminis, I'm like, well, they are considering a lot. And you don't want to shut that down because that's part of the good work they do. That's part of their good medicine.
Yeah.
But you watch what they're ready to integrate and move on. Watch what they do.
What do you see after June 21st? So between June 21st and July 21st, and then, what do you see after what I'll call into the Leo season? It's like, OMG. Yeah. I think we might be close to being able to, because I sense again and again, a lot of people are turning a corner and they're not going back anymore. And a lot of those corners are, I don't know what's real. It doesn't look good. I'm not having any part of this. They're hardening in a way that's really important. I think once before we maybe talked about becoming the stone, that rock inside the self. That's where that old saying, thou art Peter, and upon that rock, you can build a reality. But if you don't have that, you're on the shifting sands of time.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And there is no going back, right? Digivina is saying there's no going back. And it's
Right.
interesting. I like to use the directions with the tarot, and I figure that in sometimes to my analysis. And so I see, because in the West we read from left to right. So in that, according to that angle, the left is in the past and the direction of right is where we're going. It's the future.
Right.
And so I often will look, for example, here, they're moving towards the future. And this person is actually to the right of the card. So they're kind of getting ready. They're prepared, but they're also, they haven't integrated. It hasn't cleared. The information hasn't cleared with their heart yet, is what I'm getting with those
That's right.
cups, right? It's like they're like, no, I got to wait for more information. I'm not going to really feel motivated to step forward until I get the all okay from my heart.
Yeah.
And even this fellow, even though he is ready to sort of technically looks like the sword is going into the future, he's still looking in the past. And the birds are still going back that way. So there's something about, I do feel like so many people in our community are on the leading edge. I used to call it the thin edge of the wedge,
Yeah. That's right.
or the tip
The
of the
cutting edge.
spear, the cutting edge, right? So
Yeah.
we are at the front, but there is still this, as you said, there's this like looking back and going, really, like, am I leaving
Yeah.
all that behind? And it feels
Well,
so tentative in a way, right?
I remember the little man in brown robe saying to me a number of times, you're going to have to pick and choose the best of the old and bring that forward and select the best of the new. And you'll have the best of the old world and the best of the new world. And I don't see people thinking like that. But that would be really wonderful. If we had that kind of attitude. People often think if they have to move into the new world or the new earth, they have to let go of everything. No, you don't. And that guy in the cups sitting there, arms crossed, he's sitting in the roots of the tree. The tree is the symbol of strength and of family and of community. And that often says to me that there's something in us saying, wait a minute, it isn't just me. What about my family? What about, and that's the extended family, not just me and my spouse or my 1.8 children or whatever it is. That's really the community of people. And just, I can't remember who, somebody I was just reading was saying that the Buddha of the future, the arrival of the Buddha, or of maybe of the Christ consciousness, the return of the Christ, is not going to be an individual thing. It's going to be something that arises in a form of community. And I just love that. I thought, oh, yes, everybody is really feeling alone and isolated, even though we're no longer having to stay 6 feet apart or wear masks. A lot of people are feeling very like, where's my like-minded people? And that actually brings me to one of the things that I wanted to share. We're in a reality with 8 billion people. There's, and every single individual, and this is a fact of consciousness, every single individual is a unique world all by themselves. So when I look out at 8 billion people here making a reality work, why does it work? It works because there's enough people who have a similar frequency range, similar kinds of ideas, enough cooperation to make it all work. And that, what we're seeing now, and this is something that's some pretty advanced physics that is not really being talked about in the physics of our 3D world. But when a population gets big enough, It will do the same thing a cell does. When a cell is going to reproduce, it splits. And you have an old cell and a new cell, and the old cell eventually dies and the new one takes over. But that is what I kind of see happening here. That is a truth for not only cells, but for populations in a civilization. That is true for galaxies, for universes, and that's something that we don't get taught. But where I come from, that's understood as common. That's the way things are. So the reality is that when you have a whole bunch of people who are saying we want to take over, and you've got a whole bunch of new technology and a whole bunch of new energy sources, which we do, which not very many people know about all those alternate theories or alternate, they're not really even theories, alternate forms of energy. Those are what change a population or a civilization, and especially the new form of energy. Because when you get a new form of energy, all kinds of new technology becomes possible, and that disturbs the old power structures that have been built up around the old energy. And so there's a fight. And it's a little fight when you have a little population, but it's a bigger fight when you have 8 billion people. So we're at this point where, we have enough people, or we had enough people thinking in similar ways to make it look like the reality was really stable. What we have now is enough people that are out of that rut or that line of thinking, and they're pulling in a new direction. And then we have the people trying to take over, they're pulling in their own direction. And then we have all kinds of new energy sources and new technologies, and there's been a shattering of the similarity or the consensus. This is a consensus reality. And so here we are struggling to figure out, okay, what's next? Where are we going? What's happening here? And that is, I think, something that we are going to have to navigate. And it's a little bit tough when it gets to the crux of the matter. But yeah, we'll go through it. We will.
I really love that, Penny. I love what you're saying about, like, almost that we are accustomed to being held in a consensus reality.
Yeah.
And the benefit of that is that you get to just go about your earthly business and not really have to think too critically using logic and reason and the things that you're going to be talking about today. We get to just kind of go along with the flow of things, and it all feels pretty copacetic, right? But the challenge with that, of course, as we know, is that those consensus realities can get hijacked and maneuvered in a direction that isn't so ideal, and we don't even notice it happening. And so the gift of where this bifurcation that we're in is that we get to choose what we take into the new consensus realities that we're going to design. But my suspicion has been for quite a while that they're not going to be as mass formation oriented. They're going to be a lot more personalized in the sense of, I'll have my cosmology, you'll have yours, Penny, and we'll have a lot of commonalities in our beliefs, but there'll be areas where we may differ, and we respect each other's differences as long as we're applying the basic laws of universal natural law and so on. So it's an exciting time going into this. What is real? We're making up the new world reality. We're making up our own consensus, but it's also terrifying because we got to do the work of that. I want to say one more thing, because you said something about, what do we bring with us? And people are kind of at a loss. They think they have to leave everything behind. And for years, I've been like you, been interested in all these alternative paradigm, everything from regenerative agriculture, alternative education, new types of currency and exchange models and so on. I've been doing that stuff since the 70s pretty much, right?
Oh,
And so you and I are here to tell the audience that you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
mm-mm.
There's people that have gone down everything from, alternative different types of construction. And you Google right now how to grow a tomato, you're going to get 5,000, maybe 100,000 different really awesome, innovative ways to grow a tomato, right? Like we live in such a time where you can literally create your reality and have so much resource to build it with,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So
Yeah.
let's not be afraid of letting go of the nasty old garbage system. It's like,
Yeah. I mean, I think the things that bring us joy are the things that we should be taking with us as we move into the future. There's things other people would look at and go, "What are you doing with that?" Well, that's close to your heart. You bring it. You bring it. You bring those things that symbolize, because symbols represent energy. You bring those things that symbolize something that you want to keep in your life. And if you let go of everything, that's like the out of the frying pan into the fire kind of thinking. We don't need that. So, and we are, because this kind of leads into the maybe logic. Do you guys, I don't know if anybody knows what maybe logic is, but if you look at the quantum computing talk that's out there, and you hear about qubits. And, a couple of years ago, I did a whole bunch of research and had kind of been watching that for a while to see, okay, is this civilization catching up with anything that's already out there? And it was really rewarding in so many ways, because being a student of consciousness and knowing a lot of things about that and a lot of laws of consciousness, and then looking at quantum computing, it was clear to me that the quantum computing is beginning to foreshadow the knowledge that is already held in consciousness and the techniques of being psychic and things like that. So qubit is this ability of a particle or of a qubit to not be a 0 or a 1 in computer talk, but to be in this state of maybe. And so when you have that third option, instead of just being on or off, black or white, yes or no, you have this maybe. What is that introducing into our lives? It's conscious choice. What are you doing that chooses or that makes that qubit respond? And so they're running into all kinds of problems with quantum computers that do react to consciousness and the frequencies of consciousness. And they haven't put it all together yet. But, as I watch it, it's like they're going to figure out that consciousness is frequency. And that that there's some frequencies you can shield and some you can't. And so when you have to choose or you take an action, you are setting up, you're giving that qubit directions. And so that comes to the whole thing of giving yourself directions to see something, to know something, to be intuitive, or to get a psychic answer or whatever. And what happens? Why does it not work for some people? It actually does work for everybody, but it runs into your bias, your consciousness. And that consciousness is not just a little bit of thinking. It's a whole lot of chemical being created in response to the frequency set. So chemistry follows frequency. So you hear a trigger word. There's nobody else's trigger word. It's just yours. And immediately your whole self responds and your chemistry changes. And that creates your moods, your hormones, your feeling state, your everything. So how do you get beyond that? How do you get beyond bias, which is really frequency and chemical habituation to a
Mhm.
certain kind of response?
Mhm.
What if you want a different response? So, maybe we should ask the cards, what's the best way to get beyond the physical response to something and and therefore adjust or adapt or ameliorate or our biases?
Mhm. Let's do that. That is a great question. And have a peek here at what the cards say about that.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah,
know,
we have a whole bunch of learning that's, I think, going on in the greater population about consciousness, and I don't think people are aware. They couldn't label it, they're not all that interested, but I see it happening, and it's
mhm.
wonderful. Their biases are being adjusted, ready or not.
Well,
So
and it's interesting because it's similar to how intuition operates. All the years I've been working with it, you must stay in that, I call it the power neutral
that's
frequency
right.
of love,
Yep,
which is your intention. You're coming through that heart portal,
yep,
and it doesn't need to know the yes or no right away. It needs to feel the resonance, the frequency
right,
of alignment. Is this good for me or you or us right at this moment? We don't
right.
need to analyze it to death. We don't need to capture it and solidify an absoluteness in it.
Or
And
cut it open and do an autopsy or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
in a way, it is returning to, look at this, returning to
Oh,
innocence. So let's
yep.
open that up a bit more. Whoops, here, I'll drag the cards over there. Not me. There we go. um,
Okay.
so yeah, 6 of Cups, as
Wow.
you're saying, the emotions, the heart, the feelings, and this is so much about the naturalness, the
Right.
innocence, the natural inner child energy,
Yep.
getting back to almost the innocent place before, like you were saying, the bias, the trauma. Bias comes from being
Trump.
traumatized, right?
Right.
Triggered. And if we go to our innocence, for some of us, we might have to go back lifetimes. We may have had a lot of bias, a lot of trauma coming in, even in this lifetime and in our childhoods. So, but returning to that innocent state, which is how I always encourage my students that I'm teaching them intuition and working with the tarot, is to return to innocence and that state of wonder and curiosity, not having to know the absolute answer and not bringing your bias in right away. And I always use the story of Penny, you'll love this. Um, when I was earlier on in my reading career, we all have to work with bias, right?
We
And
do.
so what would happen is I would get a client come in and they would ask a question, and the cards would clearly indicate something, a direction for them, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe for them, it was about focusing on career versus focusing on family or something. And it would be clearly, oh, yeah, you're meant to focus on career, la, la, la. And, the mind starts to kind of adapt its bias onto it and be like, yeah, that's the right answer. And then literally the very next client would come in and invariably ask the same exact question. And if I didn't stay really in my heart and
Yep.
wasn't still hung on with my rational mind to the last bias,
Uh-huh.
I would miss the cue and I'd be like, all of a sudden it would be like, whoosh, now we're going the other way. It'd be
Yeah.
like, here we go. We're going with, actually, this is your time to really be immersed in, your family and your relationships or whatever. And in the beginning, I would just be like, wow, my head would be spinning because I'd be like, I just got taken from one end of the spectrum to the other. And that happened a lot in the first few years of my reading career. And I think it was my soul training me to not go to bias,
Yeah.
because one person's truth and the best advice or the best support from their soul direction at this moment could be very different from
Yeah.
someone else.
And you know what? Just the opposite also works. I had early in my reading career, a thing where I was playing gypsy. It was supposed to be a joke, but it turned out to be way more serious. But a whole family of women came in. They were having a problem. I didn't know them. They just showed up over a 2-day thing at this event, and they all asked the same question. And I remember afterwards, they contacted me and they said, "You gave every one of us exactly the same answer." And I thought, I remember thinking while I was sitting there, what is it? Why is everybody asking the same question? And I just went with what I had, which was, the same answer over and over. But that's another form of, you have to trust that, if you're being tested, they were tested to see if I would give everybody a different answer. Right. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So, you have to trust what's coming. You have to be open and unbiased, whether it's the same answer for 6 people in a row or like the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. And that's where you become, your relationship with your tools becomes like a sacred contract, because you're like, I always say, whatever I see, I will say in some form. I will, discreetly say or very tactfully say, but I will address it, because that's my relationship with source, with my team, is that I will speak to everything that is shown. But I'm always going to be I'm starting the whole thing coming through that power neutral portal of love, which is about non-biased, right?
Yeah.
So here we are, returning to innocence. Wow. So it feels like, again, this is exactly what we were just talking about, practicing the tools of the tools of discernment, and also staying in that power neutral place. I just love this. This is where learning intuition and working with different divination and dowsing tools is really helpful for people's spiritual growth, because you don't get good answers. You don't get helpful answers or information on a regular basis if you are swinging all over the place with your own personal opinion.
Oh my, that is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It trains you.
It teaches you to be in that maybe logic place all the time. And gradually the outcome of that is you begin to be very, very conscious in the things that you choose, in the decisions, the words, the actions that you take, etc. So
I'm going to put the last one down here. Yeah. So it's going forward again. The other piece of advice or support I always give to people, I say, I don't have confidence in my abilities. I have confidence in my intention. So my intention is to be of service and to be in my heart.
Right.
And that isn't just about being nice and saying nice, sweet things. Sometimes it's pretty brutal what comes through.
I know.
But it's doing it with that compassion and that desire to be of service.
Yeah.
In that heart frequency. Now, Christine is asking the interesting question here. When does the higher self fit into this? That's usually where I go. What would you say to that, Penny?
The higher self, you can't separate that out from yourself. You either expand your consciousness so you have a bigger range that you can address. And that, I don't use the term higher consciousness if I can avoid it, because it's too reminiscent of hierarchy and, people feeling that they're above others or they're better than others, etc. So I tend to think of it, in my experience has been, that you don't become a higher self, you become a more expansive being. And what that means in technical terms is that you have access to all kinds of information. Some of it is mind-blowing to others, some of it is mind-blowing to you. But if you are too biased, then your consciousness is going to shut you out of all of that expansive, that whole world of information that's out there. And so the higher self is really just the you that has expanded to be less biased, more relaxed, more open, more of service on purpose, of service. And so if that's, if you say that's where you're going, that is where you want to go. And you can put whatever label on it you want. But if you're going there, that says to me, you already have access to a lot of frequencies. Frequencies are information that other people either don't have, or they're afraid of, or they're too biased, or they don't want to know the truth, or they don't want what they want.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that was so helpful. I'm going to take this down now and put us back to this screen. And there is a question here that I would like to address, just because other people might be thinking about this. Yago Lupi is saying, what happened with the predictions? Trump, Elon? So, I'm guessing that in the beginning of Intuition Fridays, you and Janine used to do more predictive work. And where are you at with that, Penny? Because, I'm happy to swing in that direction a little bit if people really want that. But
Sure.
how do you feel about that?
Okay, well, several things. Okay, you're going to get a whole lecture on consciousness. So let me see. Let me cut it down here.
Yago Lupi.
Okay, so when you are far enough away from the actual core change of something, it's easy to see where everything is going. And so you just say what you see. The closer you get to that actual point of decision, typically you're going to have to stop every prediction and do nothing but watch. And you learn to sense the energy and where the energies are flowing. And then you make your decision based on where those energies are going, and whether or not you want to get on board and ride with that energy, or if you want to jump in upstream, or jump in and be swimming upstream because you jumped in too early and it creates a whole bunch of effort, etc. So the discipline of intuitive information is holding still and watching. And the second thing I would say about prediction, and this is something that I know, I'm not sure how many other people would be aware, but you should be aware that a prediction from some people is more of a wish that, they're going to call it a prediction, but it's more of a wish that they want people to go in that direction. And I call it like I see it. Some weeks or some months, like in my Look-See or my tarot, I'll say something about that Trump is not good. A whole bunch of people who love Trump come raining down on me. Maybe 2 or 3 months later, I say something that gives Trump some credit. A whole bunch of people who hate Trump, they come down on me. It's like, okay, you go ahead, say whatever you want to say. I'm interested in what people think and how they feel and what they have to say. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not predicting anymore because we're too close. And predictions are a way, they're like a cheap way of deciding. And people need to be deciding for themselves. So as a teacher of consciousness, and this is something I learned a long time ago, I would teach my students and they would come in and they get really good at doing whatever they were doing. And when they had developed themselves to an extraordinary degree, they would run into some type of crisis. And then they would call, what should I say? And I would just not be available. It's like, nope. You know what to do. You have to trust yourself. You have to decide for yourself. And that's where we're at as a population right now. People having to decide for themselves. Because if you're just following the wagon train and it's going, over the cliff, you're in big, big trouble. And so that is, that's why I stopped doing predictions and started really addressing how are some ways we could think about this. And that's, that's something that a teacher, you can't rescue people. If they make a bad decision in their own crisis, Then you come back and you sympathize and you ask, what'd you learn?
Mhm.
What do you wish you had done?
Y- y-
All of that.
You know what I'm hearing in your statements, Penny? I'm
Mhm.
hearing the humility of saying, we really don't know. We just
No,
really don't know. And it's not like all the prediction. And what I know about prediction is it is about giving us the next steps. It's
right.
about, like, I've watched over the years where readings that I've done for myself or friends and family, and it did get us going the way we were meant to go. It
That's right.
was getting us in the right direction. It was giving us the, you think of those little stepping stones across the river or something. It gave us, and usually the best predictions give you 2 or 3 choices to step onto. They don't just give you one. This isn't the only way. There's these 2 or 3 options available. You make a decision, like you said, and I always encourage people in these wild, rapids, changing times, make choices that give you more choice, not less. If
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going in a direction and you are narrowing your choices down, 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 because you're just going so one track,
Yeah.
I prefer to go in, it might not be the most popular track, but I'm going with more diversification. So for example, Trump and Elon are a great example for me. I have never been in the 100% Trump category, like love or hate or whatever, or Elon or any of them. Like, I'm always ready to pivot, but
Yep.
I recognize, because I'm paying attention to all the data and not going with a bias, which what we were just talking about, I'm able to kind of almost weave and bob and have a lot more natural flexibility in how I pivot. And I notice, and I pray for all of you, that it's not so janky. It's not so like, I'm going this way and then I get ripped over here. Like,
That's right.
to me, if we can be a little more gracious and relaxed in this process,
Mhm.
yes, we're keeping our eyes open. And I just love the analogies you're giving and the ones that are coming through me, Penny, about, getting on the stream, catching the wave, or getting on. I was seeing when you were saying it about a boat or something, it's like you can hypothesize as you're coming up to it, like, oh, I think I'll go that way and I'll get on that side and I'll do the, but once you're there and the water's rushing past you and you're in the rapids, you just got to really go with what feels right. You got to be in
That's
your
right.
instincts at that point. Like, this
That's
is
it.
the time for us. We're so close to it. We got to be instinctually operating now.
That's exactly right. And if you I was going to say fail, I shouldn't maybe use that. If you don't know how to watch where the energies are going, then for God's sake, just watch where your energy is going. That's really addressing that whole question of bias. Bias is something that you either want or don't want. And if you want something and it ends up smacking you in the nose and, destroying half your life, well, you'll learn a big lesson, but it's not the end of the world. If you make a choice that ends up that's very successful, that too is going to smack you in the face, and you're going to end up in this place of shock about, wow, I did it. That also has to be navigated. And it's almost as difficult to deal with the ramifications of success as it is with failure. We have to be more mature. And right now, because there's so much deception, if you're trying to decide on the basis of all that deception and argument, then you're being distracted completely. The real thing is to get far enough away and watch and listen and look for the little signs and be prepared to make a move in whatever direction. That's that page of swords. Going to take a step, but waiting to see where is the real energy going.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely. And really, at some point in this, trusting our instincts. And, like, I don't see any of the predictive information as bad or wrong. Like, and
Yeah.
this is where I always tell people, if it's resonating with your heart, when you walk away from hearing that prediction, do you feel like, boy, I could roll up my sleeves and really get prepared now? I'm in the zone. I feel creative. I feel curious. I've got ideas. I feel excited. Or do you go like, Shizen. I
Yeah,
feel
right.
scared as I'll get out, and I just want to
Yeah.
go hide my head,
Yeah.
like, so how helpful is it for us to
Yeah.
continue to look at things that are really frightening? I'm not saying that all of those potentialities don't exist. Man, we're on, all the burners on the stove are boiling at high heat
That's
right
right.
now, right? There's no denying that. And then
Yeah.
also, wow, what a time to be very instinctually intuitive, like just
Mhm.
look at the lay of your own land. The answer for all of us is going to be somewhat different as well,
A
right?
little bit, because each person is a unique individual world. You know, the way you see the world and the way you experience, you may agree with somebody that that's bad or that's good, but that doesn't mean they're in the same world you're in. You're in your own world. And that is what builds a consensus reality that I was
Mhm,
talking about earlier. They're similar enough that people
mhm.
say, oh, yeah, I'm with like minded people. And so, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And you know what I heard as well in what you were saying earlier was with that, creating spaciousness. I think it was when you were talking about the logic that,
maybe
and
logic.
yeah, the
Yeah,
maybe is that
right,
space for, because if we're always grabbing for the next, like, okay, the logic, so we have a tool to do something,
right.
we're learning to be more than do. And so if we
Good point.
create space, this is what I've been teaching myself, and it has to do with how I schedule my life, by the way. And I'm really learning, and they're going, why am I so overwhelmed? Why am I so busy? It's like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, right. Why do I schedule myself to the absolute nth of my
right.
capacity? And so, and thinking, well, because I have to do this and this and this, and I blah, 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 right? And so, what I've learned is, like, if I can leave some space, spirit can fill in.
Yes,
My intentions are clear, like you were saying, know where you're going, know what you care about, know what you love. My intentions are clear. My efforts go to my perfection number around 77.7. And then I leave the
yeah,
space for spirit to come in and give me some gifts.
right,
Bless us, right? Like,
right.
I say, let's make some space for spirit to help us, give
That's
us
right.
some blessings.
I can't agree more. Just just in the last few months, I have been so overscheduled. And I end up getting to the point of being almost rebellious. And then I think, wait, I just need, 20 minutes or 30 minutes. That's my vacation for the year, is 20 minutes on a Tuesday morning, that kind of thing. And so in that 20 minutes, I end up reading something or seeing something on YouTube or talking to somebody or doing some kind of errand in town and, chatting with somebody in town. And then what I discovered 2 days later is that information that I read or heard or talked about or discussed, with somebody, is absolutely critical for some kind of work that I'm doing that I didn't recognize at the time I was doing it. I was just feeling rebellious. I'm going to go do this. And turns out when you allow that space, as you call it, which I like that, um, spirit fills that with exactly what you need coming up. So when everything is scheduled to the max and there's no breathing room and you don't get ornery and stubborn like I do frequently, um, then you don't leave any space for spirit.
Mm.
You're
Mhm.
in a relationship with yourself, and that's it. And
Mhm.
you can't really, you're not going to enjoy life that way. The enjoyment is in the little realizations of, oh wow, I'm so glad I read that rebellious piece, or watch that ridiculous YouTube thing, or because that's exactly what somebody is bringing up and wants to talk about, or asks a question in the tea or whatever. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, I think coming around with all of these topics we've been covering today, is this energy of we are right where we're supposed to be.
Yes.
And, you know, by not overextending into having to know absolutely everything, and that gets us into being afraid, like, oh, I can't discern what's real and what isn't real, and so on,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
And this maybe logic piece, which is telling us to leave some space, right? That we are so intelligent. Again, I have to say that being a Gemini, I've been tricked by my own intelligence. No, I for real,
Okay.
and it's quite embarrassing. I guess what I'm saying, and it hasn't happened a lot. I'm pretty good at sewing up all the loose ends, but the couple of times where I went in like Miss
Yeah.
Know It All and had a strong opinion, and I had oodles of evidence to support it, and
Mhm.
I was wrong.
Oh, I've done that. I've
And
done that.
and so here's where we go in this day and age with all of this intel that we're taking in, and it's like, you know, everything points to that being the truth.
Yeah,
We
but
could still be wrong.
yes.
Just the
Yeah.
information alone is not enough.
Yeah.
We
That is
have
so
to
true.
wait and watch as things unfold, because all of that information could be based on this point in reality, which is almost gone. Like, you know, we live in the old, like Esther
Yeah.
and Jerry Hicks used to say, we live in the energy of 3 months ago, our frequency. So, like, what if it's already totally outdated and we're basing
Yeah.
our entire truth on that, and it's
Yeah.
wrong?
I've
Right?
had that experience where I have my theory all set. I think I know what I'm doing. I go to a meeting, all of my reasons all stacked up and written up nicely. Somebody opens their mouth right at the start, makes one statement, maybe even half a statement, and I go, "Oh, I didn't even think of that." And it changes everything. So we need one another and all that input. Of course, we're getting fed by a fire hose of input right now. But, the more the fire hose, the more pressure it exerts, the more you have to step back further. So
Yeah.
that actually, the last thing I want to talk about it, you just kind of hinted at something that I want to kind of close this with, and it's the rapture. So I think this is how I am seeing everything that is happening out there. People were talking about consciousness. Some are talking about ascension. If you're in a religious framework, you're talking about the rapture. What is that rapture when it comes to what I'm going to call the new world? Or ascension when it comes to the new world. It's the expansion of consciousness, period. And once you get far enough away from these old frequency signals, that there's one of several things are going to happen. One, you're going to move far enough away that now you can't even see these guys anymore. They're on a whole different frequency or in a whole different frequency range. So that's one thing that I see happening. People are just ignoring some stuff. Okay. And what they're ignoring is all the noise, which is probably a good thing. The second possibility when you get the rapture happening is that you end up with the two people, or the two, I'll call them the antagonists. Let's see, is that, what did I have well, if you have two antagonists, okay, you could end up with both of them destroying one another. And I have no reality system that's workable at all. And it just dies out. And that does happen. There are reality systems all over the cosmos. So then the third possibility is that those two antagonists interact in such a way that they produce, by their own frequency interaction, a third set of possibilities. And that third set attracts some people, and it might be wonderful, it might not be wonderful, but that third frequency set might not be very sustainable, or it might need the antagonist who are competing and fighting with one another to continue to compete and fight in order to continue producing that third frequency. So if the people in that third frequency don't take responsibility for furthering that themselves, boom, their reality dies out as well. A reality dies out when not enough people of like mind and comfortable in that frequency range do not gather there. So this, we're at a point where we're getting close to what might be called the rapture or the ascension moment or the disappearance moment. And that typically is kind of a rough moment. And so next time we get together, I think we should talk about the catastrophe cycle. I think we
Yes.
should talk about a few other cycles, natural cycles that go on that we never pay attention to because we're humans and we're not a planet. We're not a solar system or a planet or a sun. So
I love that. I would love to talk about cycles. I've got
yeah,
some of my own. I did predictions a few years back, and some of them have come to pass. And
yeah,
again, predictions being about more so about training us to pay attention to the cycle as opposed to the accuracy right on the nose of the prediction. It's like it's really about recognizing these are natural cycles, these are natural forms and ways of evolution, and we can start to work in that, have a framework of that. I think that's really exciting
yeah.
because then we know, it's like knowing how to ride waves on a surfboard. You're like, here's a big one coming. Let's get out there and paddle, right?
Yeah,
It's like, why
right.
not? Because we want to ride it. And
Yeah.
so I love that. Let's do that next time, Penny.
Okay.
I realized I didn't do what I was supposed to do here in the mid-show, so I'm just going to bring up
Oh,
our information here. Oh, Penny Kelly. For those of you that don't already know where to find Penny, you can find
yeah.
her here on pennykelly.com, and she has all kinds of courses. She has a shop and ebooks and online consciousness community. So awesome. Also, this is something I was supposed to talk about mid-show. I apologize I didn't, but we have this incredible new store connected to the Beyond Mystic platform called the
Oh,
Scorpling Shop. And it's so great. So here we are. We have astrological crystal kits, Awaken the Magic of Your Sign with Crystal Healing. And there's a show that is going along with this. So more to come, more information about that coming up in the near future. Of course, as always, if you want to find me and book a session, you can find me over at Beyond Mystic Consultations. And please remember to follow us on Rumble and share that, and also on YouTube. There we go.
yep.
Looking forward to some great shows coming up here in the near future. And it looks like, Penny, we are on again next week. I can't wait. I just realized how much I've missed this.
Okay. Oh, you know what? Maybe we are not on next week. I'm going to be traveling next week. It's the week after that.
The week
Yeah,
after.
the 20th, I think we're on.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll see you
Yeah.
then, folks.
Yeah. Take care of yourselves, you guys. Be cool.
Yes.
Watch and wait. Watch and wait.
Watch and wait.
Yeah.
Blessings from all of us. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye-bye.